Oh, good morning. When Carla and I went through Unity Seminary, we had 5 international students. People from, in fact, one student was from Nepal, and actually had to drop out after the first 6 months because there was turmoil in his country, and so he went back. But they overthrew their dictator and actually formed a democracy for the first time, back about 15 years ago. But 3 of our students were from Jamaica, and we got to learn, some part of the Jamaica culture. And one of them was sharing with me that there is this, one of their adages is that they are the land of looking back. And what it came from was like so many places here in the Western Hemisphere a couple hundred years ago, there was a slavery state. And if you could escape as a slave, there was a refuge up in the mountains. Now, up in the mountains, there was these bushes, this thicket with long thorns on them. So usually people get to these things, and it's like they just wouldn't mess with them or go beyond them. But it ends up some slaves had actually cut a pathway through this thicket so that you could be on the other side of the thicket and be safe. But they said that what they didn't call it that back then, but what they had was post-traumatic stress syndrome, and so even though they were safe, they'd be looking back. It's like, oh, are they going to find us? Are they going to catch us? And it and it kind of reminds me about how often we get caught up in something that happened to us and we can't let go of it, and it affects all of our decisions from that moment forward. You notice that I chose to dream the possible dream, and of course, that triggers the song from Man of La Mancha, to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe. So yeah, it's it. Who says it's impossible? So often we get caught up in the well, that wouldn't work. Well, yeah, I tried that once before, 20 years ago, but without considering that, yeah, it could work. And frankly, if you've got a burning desire that keeps coming back on that particular thing, whatever it is, it's yours to do. Now, I'm not talking about a whim. Sometimes you get a whim that'll come and go, and you recognize, nah, that's really not me. And that's part of the process. What's me and what isn't me? And so often we compare ourselves to events in the world to establish who we really are. It's like, no, that's not me. Well, yeah, that's a part of me. So a lot of people get disillusioned. I was thinking with the baptism yesterday, and just seeing the imagination of kids, running off, and yet, we start to hit those teen years and the 20s where we're told what we can't do or what we can't achieve. We get disillusioned. We give up our dreams too early. Most people, though, aren't dreaming big enough anymore. But we are not most people. We are what we fondly call unitics. We recognize that our thoughts, our feelings, can create our experience in the world. The Gospel of Luke, first chapter, 37th verse, a woman who had been declared barren, couldn't have children. He says, for nothing is impossible with God. So if we take the premise that there's no need for us to be more spiritual because we're already spiritual beings having a human experience, we can embrace the concept that we are co-creating with God. If we are children of God, there comes a day when we become adults in God, as we learn the unity principles and learn how to express ourselves. We have an inheritance to claim. So take a moment. What do you consider possible for you? Or better yet, what would you do if you were guaranteed that you'd succeed? No possibility that you could fail. What would you do? What is your passion? Or what are your passions? You can have more than one. We want to be more than what we would be just as ourselves. We are co-creating with God. It's nice to have a partner with that kind of power. There's a song that was written by the music director at Unity in Chicago back 30 years ago. Carla and I started out at Unity in Chicago, and it's Wake Up and Dream. It's been recorded by several recording artists through the years. Every person has a dream. All of you have had a dream at some point in your life. So what happened to it? Was it a worthwhile dream? And it's an opportunity for you to once again explore it. In fact, I'm going to go through 5 questions to ask yourself. So let's go ahead and put up the first one. So what is your dream? What is my dream? Does this dream ignite a passion? Like I said, it's not a whim, but it's like it's there all of the time. It's like, yeah, whatever it is. It's like I'm going to write the next great American novel, or I'm going to make the best dinner tonight that I've ever made. Whatever it is, what's your passion? If you have this dream, it is yours to demonstrate. Every day of our life, we actually have a new opportunity to express ourselves. We are born again every day when we have a new realization of the consciousness that's growing within us, our spiritual awareness. So when I find myself, facing a challenge and find myself asking questions like, how is this going to work? Someone gave me an affirmation back in 1987, and it is, when I hear myself asking, how is this going to work, say, how is none of my business? How is none of my business? If we are co-creating and we have that desire, we do whatever it is we're guided to do, and if we don't have any further guidance, it's okay. Let go of it. It'll unfold. We may have to open the possibility that we may have to give up things like excuses, complaints. We get a lot of mileage out of our complaints. Let me give you an example. There is a middle-aged woman, actually a minister, and she was vacationing with her adult kids. They had rented a beach house, and then they also rented these ATVs, these little four-wheelers where you can just go all over the place. And her adult children were, zipping up these sand dunes and over, but she found herself, she'd get about halfway up the sand dune and then slid down, and did that a couple times, and was starting to feel terribly inadequate. and one of her son-in-laws pulled up next to you and said, Mary, I couldn't help but notice that each time you accelerate to go up the sand dune, you're also putting your foot on the brake. And she started realizing, the fear that she was feeling, and so a lot of us do that. We put our foot on the brake when we recognize that the only way we're going to get over the top is to let go of that fear. Number 2, does it align with my core values? What are your core values? What are the things that are most important to you? I heard a great story of a college professor who had like this 2-gallon jar on the desk, and it was full of rocks that were about the size of golf balls. And he asked his students, and it was right up to the brim, he goes, is this jar full? And several of them said yes. And then he pulled out a pitcher of gravel and poured in gravel, and the gravel all kind of shook in, and he says, is this jar full now? And there was silence in the room. These college students get pretty smart. Then he pulled out a pitcher of sand, and he poured sand in the jar, which went in between all of the voids and stuff that were in there. Says, is this jar full now? And then the resounding answer was no. And then he pulled out a pitcher of water and poured water in until it was overflowing with water. And he said, I wanted to just show you this example. He says, because your life will be a lot like this jar. It will get full of all sorts of things that you didn't think of or you didn't plan for. But if you start with the larger rocks, if you start with your core values and make sure that those are always in the jar, then you can handle the gravel, the sand, and the water. But if you don't start out with those core values in the jar, you're not going to have any room in your life for them. Another example is a woman who had this dream of being a performer on cruise ships. She really just loved that, and she had some kids, and her husband was very supportive of her, so why don't you go for it? So she went for it, and the trick was, of course, that to be a performer on a cruise ship, you go for 4 months. That's it. You are on the ship for 4 months. And so she did that, and after about 3 months, she enjoyed herself, but she recognized that she was really feeling sad and lonely, and recognized that one of her core values was having quality time with her family. So at the end of that 4 months, she decided, not to re-up, but it was her decision. She had to, and that's what happens with so many of us, is we'll have this desire, and we go ahead and pursue this desire, and we fulfill the desire, but then we get to the question of what's next. But if each of us has gifts, passions, and talents, Express them. That's why you're here. Am I willing to grow? Question number 3. We always have these pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Now, in ministerial school, in seminary, we had this acronym. It was AFGO. Because part of seminary is that you go through incredible spiritual growth, and a lot of that is letting go of stuff that you felt so dear. So AFGO stands for another growth opportunity. So you come into ministerial school, and you'd be there in the morning and say, "Oh, how are you, Mary?" AFGO, Bob. I said, "Okay, I know where you're at." We used to tease the people who'd give tours of Unity Village, come through the building that had the seminary in it, and especially the first few months, someone would start and something would surface in the middle of class, so you'd go find a nook in the room, just sit there and cry, just bawling. So the tours would come through, and the guides got to the point when they came through the seminary building, and just say, "Oh, what's wrong? What's wrong with him?" He goes, "Oh, just a ministerial student." Dealing with their stuff. A young man went fishing along a river. He just moved there, and he was catching fish and all that, but he was noticing down the river there was another guy, an older gentleman, fishing, and he'd pull out a big fish, and he'd pull out this ruler, and he'd throw the fish in and back in. But then he'd pull out another like medium-sized fish, he'd ruler, and he'd put that one in the bucket, And so as the gentleman was wrapping up and getting ready to leave, the young guy went over and said, I noticed that, you were throwing some fish back and keeping others. And I was wondering, is it just the type of fish, the flavor and all of that? And he said, "No, I just needed to find a fish that fit my frying pan." What is your capacity for what you can do? What is your capacity for what you can handle today? And number 4, am I co-creating with God? I already touched on this a few minutes ago. If we believe, that this desire needs to be expressed, the idea is to start the journey. You may not know how to get to the end, but by starting the journey, you'll get further guidance along the way. In the Gospel of Matthew, 18th chapter, 18th verse, Jesus is teaching. He says, "Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Now, I've talked to you before about how there are 2 kingdoms that Jesus taught about. One was the kingdom of God, and the other was the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of God is that absolute God presence that's always there, never changes, is the same now as it was 2,000 years ago, and same now as it will be 2,000 years from now. The kingdom of heaven is our growing spiritual awareness, our awareness that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And as we move through the day, there are so many things that happen that will try to make us forget that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, AFGOs. And so heaven is that spiritual awareness. So when he was talking about, "Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth, you shall bound in heaven." So whatever emotional attachments you have on earth are going to be emotional attachments you're going to have in your spiritual realm as well. And whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And then he goes on and says, "Again I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them." There's something very powerful about having at least one other person pray with you. And in this room, you have a prayer partner, if you wish. I often encourage people, in the classes and stuff I teach, as we wrap up a class, it's like, having a prayer partner. Somebody you can just call and talk to for 3 minutes about, this is what's up, this is what I want to pray for the day, here's the intention I want to set for the day. Just someone to have that kind of a check, And so think about that and ask somebody to just be your prayer partner. Wayne Dyer. A lot of you know Wayne Dyer. Of course, he passed away just a few years ago in 2015. A lot of unity connections there, but he was very much into the Eastern philosophy. He shared a story of how he had this really great speaking gig in Chicago, going to have like a larger crowd than he had ever had before. And he went to the airport and discovered his flight had been canceled along with a number of others. So he went to the ticket counter and starts talking to the clerk, and the clerk says, no, there's no way you can make it to Chicago tonight. And he took a deep breath. He says, can I talk to your supervisor? So the clerk goes and gets the supervisor, and the supervisor comes, and Wayne says to him, I know this is a tough day for a lot of people here, but I'm talking to your clerk, and he's saying that it is impossible for me to get to Chicago before my speaking gig tonight at 7 o'clock. What I need is to work with somebody at this computer who considers it possible for me to get to Chicago. And this light went on where the supervisor says, okay, sure. And he worked on the computer for about a minute, and he says, Mr. Dyer, you're right. We can connect you through this other city, and that'll get you to Chicago. And sure enough, Wayne Dyer, he was able to at least call ahead, but he walked in literally 10 minutes before the speaking gig in Chicago. So yeah, something might appear, to be impossible, but push it a little bit. I remember back about 30 years ago when I was working at a radio station, the general manager had us all read this book, and it was called Running Through Walls. And it's like, if you see a wall, it's good to check to make sure it isn't an illusion before you stop. And number 5, is it good for others? The reason each of us have been put here on the earth is that we do have special gifts, passions, and talents. And it's that harmony of all of these expressions of God in this world that will make this world a better place. And one of our special gifts that I know you have, just like I do, and that is that I can see the divine in you when you can't see it in yourself. So we bring out the best in each other, and that's one of the vital linchpins, of being here at Unity of Tampa, is finding like-minded people who can bring out the best in you. So, as many of you know, Unity of Tampa is moving. We just got a tentative moving date, which is like mid-January, so we're actually going to be here through the end of the year. At least it looks that way. We'll keep you posted. But there's a lot of uncertainty right now. But what is your dream for what Unity of Tampa can be? And are you willing to see, a location for us that only the conglomerate of our own thoughts and feelings can create? You've got the takeaways already on the screen there, the 5 questions. So this week, what is my dream? What is it that you really want to express in the world? Does it align with my core values? Is it truly me? Is this the expression that I want to have in the world? Number 3, am I willing to grow? Yeah, there'll be some supposed obstacles that'll surface, but test out that wall and make sure it's real and not paper mache. Number 4, am I co-creating with God? Do I recognize that, it's not just me that does the work. It is the Father through me who does the work. And that's the case with you too. Take that first step. You'll have a different perspective from that spot. And number 5, is it good for others? And what am I doing, and is it truly making the world a better place? Our video today is a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.
Young boys aren't easily appalled, but 11-year-old Preston Sharp sure knows the feeling.
Yeah, I was really surprised.
And disappointed.
Really disappointed, yeah.
And you seen what about before?
I'm not this angry and passionate.
Preston's mom, April, says what upset her son so was visiting his grandpa's grave in Redding, California, and realizing not every veteran in the cemetery had a flag. April says even hours later, he was still harping on it.
And I was like, son, if you're going to complain about something, you have to do something about it or let it go. And he's like, well, I'm going to do something about it, Mom.
Next thing she knew, Presto was taking odd jobs and soliciting donations to buy flags and flowers for every veteran in his grandpa's cemetery. And when that cemetery was covered, he moved on to another, and then another. And here we are, 2 years and 23,000 graves later. And he does this every week, rain or shine, especially rain. Why?
like they were out there in the ring doing their job, protecting us.
Preston says coming out here in the rain, or in this case 100-degree heat, is the least he can do.
Thank you for your service, Michael.
His devotion really is enormous.
Thank you for your service, Samuel.
And contagious.
Thank you guys so much for coming out today.
Now, when word gets out that Preston will be at a cemetery, a lot of folks feel compelled to join in.
It's just amazing.
People like Vietnam veteran Fred Loveland.
What he's doing brings them out because they can't believe that a young man in this country is doing what he does. Would that put the flower in?
It is a movement of young and old,
Thank you for your service, Lewis.
of those who serve their country, and those who are so grateful they did.
Thank you for your service, Alan.
All led by this little Pied Piper of patriotism, who saw an injustice and decided to do something about it. It's just another one of 365 chances to do what's right.
Thank you for your service, Norman.
Steve Hartman, on the road, in Redding, California.
From the Gospel of Matthew, 17th chapter, 20th verse. Jesus said to them, "For truly I say to you, if you have faith as small as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you." May you always be open to God's guidance and grace. Let's go ahead and prepare for meditation.